This podcast is recorded on stolen and unceded Aboriginal land.
We acknowledge the First Nations and elders of this country and join their calls for justice. Always was, always will be Aboriginal land. All right, Amy, we are recording this before the Queensland state election results. We don't know what's going to happen. I'm assuming it's a Greens majority government. That's what I'm betting on. Those are my thoughts. What are are you comfortable giving a prediction?
Well, knowing Queensland, absolutely. The Greens are a shoo-in in Queensland.
Because you're a Queenslander at heart, right? Did you grow up in Queensland?
I did grow up in Queensland, yeah. I moved there when I was about 7 from South Australia and spent all of my schooling and university and a big chunk of my career in Queensland, covering Queensland politics. But I feel like being a Queenslander is more of a state of mind than actually a location. Right. So people who have spent any time in Queensland and have just felt like they're at home will probably understand that.
I identify as a Queenslander. That's good.
I do, yes. She, her Queenslander.
My pronouns are Queenslander. We will go through all the results next week once we actually know them. Of course, people listening to this podcast will know what's going on. We did want to talk about this particular story, though.
9 News can also reveal one of the more bizarre developments of this campaign. Carola Veloso-Busic is running for the Animal Justice Party in the southern Brisbane seat of Miller, but is displaying the signs of her rival, Greens candidate Liam Flenady, on her fence, who the Animal Justice Party is preferencing.
Are you a Greens candidate in disguise?
No, not at all. God, no. No, I don't. I'm pretty apolitical. I'm basically into the animal justice concept.
Yeah.
Otherwise,
But you're just a Green supporter.
I would love to be the dictator of this country, but I also think the Greens are really stupid. They're just less stupid.
If you think they're stupid, can I ask why you have their signs on your front fence?
Because I think everyone should vote for them because they're less stupid than Labor or Liberal.
Ms. Veloso-Busic says she's now going to take the green signs down.
There you go, Amy Remeikis. What do we think of the concept of Animal Justice Party candidates being apolitical and also having green signs on their house at home? Is this a good political strategy?
Look, I mean, I think it's a very particular part of our politics strategy. And I think that it's very Animal Justice Party in which, they do bring the chaos. There's a lot of good intentions behind it, but they are also, at times, as many of our minor parties and independent candidates, a little unhinged. And that just brings a little bit of spice to the elections that we all, I think, crave. And I mean, I don't think she's wrong. I mean, at least she's honest. I would love to be a benevolent dictator. And I think that most politicians, when they're entering parliament, just think, hey, wouldn't it be fantastic if it was just me running this place, much like the Brisbane Lord Mayor? So, she's in good company.
But you're not going to become the benevolent dictator if you run for the Animal Justice Party, to be fair.
No, that is true. There are a few steps that you have to get through before you can become a benevolent dictator. But look, I just think that it is the beauty of our elections in that pretty much anyone, as long as you meet all of those constitutional requirements, can run. And that means that you get, part of the beautiful rainbow that is our electorates. And so I don't think that the Animal Justice Party will be having too much impact on the Queensland election or wider elections as that happens. But I do think that they will, as will many of our minor and independent candidates, and in fact, some of the pre-selected major party candidates just continue to bring just a little bit extra to our political debate. And I think that's a great thing.
Hear, hear.
I also think the Greens are really stupid. They're just less stupid. Because I think everyone should vote for them because they're less stupid than Labor or Liberal.
We're stuck with the hosts of Chapo Shithouse podcast.
Serious danger to Australia.
All right, everyone, it is Serious Danger. Thank you very much for listening. This is a podcast about green politics in Australia. It is not an official Greens Party podcast. It's not an official Animal Justice Party podcast. But we do think the Greens are less stupid than Labor and Liberal. It's produced by Michael Griffin. I am here on Cabby and Jitterbara country. as you probably guessed, Emerald is away. This is a big week, of course. She is fighting the good fight in the Queensland state election, so she is not joining me on the show. But I'm delighted to be joined by a special guest co-host, journalist extraordinaire, Amy Remeikis. Hello, Amy.
Hello. I'm coming to you from Ngunnawal country in Canberra, and they've actually turned on the sun, which is incredible for this time of year.
Ooh. That's great. Well, yeah, I'm on the sunny coast, so I'm sweating like a motherfucker. But it is great to have you here. Of course, people will be very familiar with your work for Guardian Australia, but people might also be aware that you recently finished up at that particular outlet. What are you doing? What's going on there? Who are you working for now? Give us the lowdown.
I'll be working kind of all over the place. I'll still be doing a lot of journalism and commentary and analysis, but I'm also going to be working for the Australia Institute, where the brief is pretty much to do what I do, but through the Australia Institute's lens, which means bringing a lot more research and hopefully just getting to do a lot more live fact checks and pre-bunking of all of the unhinged shit that rolls through our parliament as it happens, because we know that it's pretty impossible to try and stop, a lie or a fallacy or whatever you legally want to call it once it's in the parliament and in the political debate and just rolling on forward. It's pretty hard to stop that. We saw that during The Voice, and I'm hoping that the more facts that we can get in there instantly in our political debate, as well with just a little bit more snark, the better chance we have of just getting some facts and truth and I think just some sanity to our political debate, because it's sorely missing, honestly. It's just, we've spoken about this before, Tom, but I just think that mainstream media and journalism as we practice it is not fit for purpose in this modern political climate. It's certainly not fit for purpose in covering somebody like Trump. It hasn't been fit for purpose in covering huge debates that are going to actually alter the way that we live and whether or not we actually will have a continued existence, like climate change, because we are trained to be objective, and I say that in inverted commas, to the point of paralysis, where basically we take, something that somebody says and then we equate it with whatever the other side is saying, no matter how unhinged. So, I mean, somebody put it to me the other day as the Greens want to save the koalas. Labor says they want to try and save some koalas, but we've still got to have fossil fuels. The Liberals say, fuck the koalas. Who's right? We don't know. The voters will decide. All these things are the same. That's essentially, modern journalism in terms of covering politics. And not everybody is like that, but it is very, very difficult when you're constantly being policed about objectivity, which I think is also a bit of a furphy, given that every single person, journalist or not, that has opinions and has a lens of which they view particular issues through. But when you're being so policed about objectivity, sometimes the truth can slip through that. And I think a lot of people are probably seeing that in how Israel's war in Palestine is being covered.
That's interesting, because there are two approaches to that, like the corrosion of public debate. People say, okay, we need media outlets that are completely neutral and objective and just deal in the facts. And we need what they would argue is the ABC, right, which is supposed to have no political biases. Another approach is to look at outlets like Novara Media in the UK or The Intercept in the US that sort of are a bit more upfront about their ideological leanings, their sympathies. They sort of say, we're putting all that upfront. This is what we're about. This is the political outlook generally that we arrive at based on our reading of history and the state of politics and economics and that kind of thing. And that's the position from which we report. So, yes, it is somewhat up to you to interrogate that and to take that with a grain of salt. Do you think that's a more honest approach to journalism and political discussion? Is that sort of what's more attractive to you these days?
Yeah, I think it is, because I think as politicians themselves have expanded the Overton window and it has shifted further to the right in a lot of Western democratic nations, that's also moved the centre where we're meant to sit in terms of objectivity. And so I would consider myself centre-left. I am certainly not a radical, but in this media landscape, I can be put forward as a radical, as somebody who's basically just like, burn it all down and let's the communists and the anarchists fight over who's going to be ruling us. And that's kind of insane to me, because I am obviously a center-left person in terms of how I view the world and how I view my politics. But I think the more that you continue to shift the Overton window, and the more that you try to grab on to this idea of objectivity being, this person said this person said this, and we're going to make both of these things as legitimate as possible because they are legitimate in our political system, the less you have for those nuances in terms of debates, and the less opportunity you have to actually call people out when they're being racist, when they're being insane, when they're being unhinged. We see that with the way that the New York Times covers Donald Trump, for instance. Like, it's constantly just taking some of the most, and they've invented a new term now, sane washing, to try and cover, try to explain how media outlets are covering somebody like Trump, which I think Queenslanders would probably recognise in how Joe Bjelke-Peterson was covered in the 70s and the 80s. But the New York Times will take something that Donald Trump says that does not make sense, that cannot happen, that is incomprehensible, illegal, racist, immoral, fascist, whatever, and they will just put it in some very nice, context and say, oh, he's going to solve the problems like this, without the context. And the context is really, really important, because our job as journalists is not to tell people what to do. It's just to give people the information they need to make the decisions about their world. That's it. That's our job. Here is all the information, and then you go off and decide. But because we see things through our own lens, but also we're trying to, meet this box of objectivity, which basically just means we have to present everything as being equal and equally sane and equally able to occur, it often means that we're not giving people the whole story. And I think that's one of the reasons why audiences are so frustrated with journalists while we continue to lose trust in mainstream media. Because again, to look at, what's happening in Gaza and Palestine and, now Lebanon, a lot of the time it looks like Western media is asking people to ignore what they're seeing directly from the ground. We're saying to them, oh, I know that you're seeing all of these atrocities, but don't worry, we're here to tell you that's not the whole story, and you're not actually seeing what you think you're seeing. It's a lot more complicated than that. And all that does is make people go, why would I listen to you on anything? Because I am seeing what is happening here. We have journalists, Palestinian journalists, telling us what's happening here. And then we have, white Western journalists just saying, oh, just, don't worry about that. We're going to report from our studios and we're going to talk to people who really know what's going on. Of course, that's not the whole story. And of course, that means that people aren't trusting anything that they hear from us.
Here, Amy Remeikis. Well, it's a pleasure to have you here co-hosting this podcast, which sits in the sensible center. Okay, I've always said that. That's where we position ourselves.
Yeah, that's exactly how I've always taken it.
Bit of show admin. A big thank you to our new patrons. Thank you for supporting the show. We love you. Thank you to Jeanette, Tom, Zuma Loser, Michael, Adam, Al, Kier, Leon. Vote for Pride in protest at Mardi Gras AGM. This is genius. People are listing their patron names as stuff they want to promote to get out there. So we'll read it out, Amy. Very clever. Well done. Vote for Pride in protest at Mardi Gras AGM. And Noetica as well. Thank you for going to patreon.com/Serious Danger AU for as little as $3 a month. You can support our show, help us cover the costs, pay Mike, and just be a good show that can do stuff and exist. So we love you very much indeed. The latest Patreon ep is our reminiscing about the 2007 federal election, Kevin 07, all that nonsense. We look back as we approach a new federal election in 2025. We cast our minds back to 2007. Aurora said, loved your personal anecdotes from the Kevin 07 era. Genuinely so funny, but also kicked my memories up of that time. I was 11 and remember the Labour fever that Australia was consumed by Now I'm 28 and can see how delusional the vibes were. ABC's The Killing Season, while not perfect, really provided some great insights into the subject, into the abject fuckery of the time. Loved your commentary and reflections. Thanks so much. Thank you, Aurora. We appreciate the feedback. And final little plug before we jump into it with Amy, I want to say we have almost sold out our shows. Almost sold out the show in Newcastle. It is happening on Saturday, November the 23rd at the Newcastle Comedy Club. I think they may well be gone by the time you hear this. And we are selling very well indeed in Sydney. We still haven't announced guests. That's happening the next day on Sunday, November the 24th, 1:30 p.m. at the Vanguard. We would love to see you there. Just go to seriousdangerpod.com for all the ticket details.
So I traveled halfway across the country to realize not everyone will love me. I'm never going back to Canberra. I'm never going back to Canberra.
All right, let us briefly chat about something we didn't get to last week. Of course, we had the territory election. The ACT election went down, and we recorded the show once again before the actual results had come out. So we thought we'd go through this quickly. And you are living, even though you identify as a Queenslander, Amy, you do live indeed in the Australian Capital Territory. So, quick refresher, we've got a unicameral system in ACT. There are 25 seats up for election, and it's the Hare-Clark system of proportional representation. Labor has been in power there since 2001, a very long time indeed. They've been in coalition with the Greens since 2012. As a local, Amy, we'll get to the results in a moment. What was the actual campaign like on the ground when people were competing for the right to govern the ACT?
Yeah, the actual campaign was Labor and Green just saying, we've done a great job. Let us keep doing that great job. And everyone else saying 23 years is enough. It's time to try and change up, who is ruling us. And that was pretty much it. It was like, let us keep going versus, honestly, you guys have had your time. Can we try something or somebody else? And in the end, it was very close, but Labor and the Greens did get across the line, although the Greens did suffer some losses in the election, and independents took their places in those cases. So it wasn't that, there was a big swing towards the Liberals, and I don't think that will ever be the case in the ACT, given the proportion of public servants and given the proportion of people who sort of look at some of the cost-cutting measures that the Liberals are famous for in terms of small government in a territory that the main business is government. Saying, hey, we're going to make government smaller isn't exactly a winning strategy. And also the ACT Liberals, while there are some that try very hard to keep it wrested into the centre, do tend to attract a lot more of the right and far right and fundamentalists and conservatives than you would consider for a progressive territory like the ACT, which was, of course, the only jurisdiction that voted yes in the voice referendum. Right. So it's a big ask to get people to say, yes, we are going to vote Liberal in the ACT. But that doesn't mean that they're overly happy with the way that Labor and Greens have been handling things, particularly when it comes to the health system, which I think is a complaint across most of Australia, because we all know that universal healthcare is an actual furphy. It's not exactly universal, and it's certainly not affordable. And the ACT system does have a lot of issues. So I think this is one that's given them a bit of a scare. There's a lot more independents there who have all campaigned on integrity, taking community voices into the Legislative Assembly, and also just basically trying to get them to start doing things that people want, which is not necessarily the tram, and more focus on things like healthcare and fundamental services. I have nothing against the light rail. I just think that, if you've got a big problem with your hospital system, maybe we can prioritize a few things a bit differently.
Fuck, governments love building shit, right? Like having, roadworks or infrastructure going on. They love being able to point to a thing and turning the shovel and be like, we built this thing. This thing wasn't here, and then we made it happen, and now it's there. And that can often be a very good thing. There are lots of things we do need build. We do need infrastructure, yada, yada, yada. But sometimes the answer is yes, just boring reform of giving more money to the public services that people desperately need to live a decent life.
Yeah, just make people's lives easier to stay alive in. seems to be like probably like the main part of the job. Just have a good school system, have a good health system, make sure that there's a safety net in terms of when people are starting to slip through that. There are a lot of people who are unhoused in the ACT because it is the most expensive place to live in Australia. There is a huge rental crisis here, and it started a little bit earlier than it did in the rest of the nation. I think Canberra was a bit more of the canary in the coal mine in terms of rental vacancies and rental unaffordability. There's a massive issue in terms of housing because the ACT government owns all the land. Everything is leasehold in the ACT, which means that they can just say, hey, your land is now worth X amount, and now we're going to put up your land rates because your land is worth more. But they're the ones who are deciding how much your land is actually worth. They're also the ones deciding when to unlock more land, which means that you're caught in this sort of like push and pull where you're sort of saying everything is so expensive we can't handle life here anymore. And then the ACT government goes, oh shit, we should probably do something about that. But it's still going to take 5-10 years for all of that to start flowing through. So I think this election has been a bit of a shock to the ACT Greens government because people were certainly not happy. But again, it also shows that people are going to vote in their own way because pretty much every single piece of local media in this territory, from the free magazines that you get at, like shops and cafes and whatever, to the organisations like the Canberra Times and everyone else, was essentially saying it's time to give somebody else a go. And the ACT voters went, we're going to give this one more round and see how 25 years of Labor government goes for the territory.
Oh, interesting. Yes, well, just going through the results in a little bit more detail, ACT Labor did win their 7th consecutive term in government. It was a 3.5% swing against them, but they didn't lose or gain any seats. They just held on to the 10 that they had, which means that they can maintain the support. They're going to get support from the progressive crossbench that was elected. The ACT Liberals held on to all 9 of their seats. They suffered a very small swing against them, but again, didn't really go anywhere. And yeah, ACT Greens swing against them of 1.3%, which meant that we lost 2 of our 6 seats. Okay, we had 6, we're down to 4. And those were ministers, Emma Davidson and Rebecca Vassarotti, aka Vanessa Amorosi, the ACT Greens minister that we had on the show a few weeks ago talking about the election. They will not be returning to the Assembly. We talked about this a little bit with Rebecca. The Greens are running this majority government pitch, right, Amy? This idea, they're saying, hey, we can govern in our own right, vote for us, and we could win, and we could actually be a Greens government. Quite a few people didn't take that very seriously, I think it's fair to say. We admired the ambition and the chutzpah involved in it. I don't know. What do you think? Was this like a massive mistake on the ACT Greens' part to kind of run on that kind of policy platform, that kind of ambition?
Yeah, I don't think it was a massive mistake. I mean, I think it's probably a bit premature. But I do think it's a sign within the Australian electoral system that the Greens are trying to signal that they are mature enough now to be considered a party of government. And there would be, several of, colleagues in the press gallery who would like basically roll their eyes at that. But I think that means that they haven't actually been paying attention to how the Greens have been positioning themselves over the last few years. It's not Bob Brown's Greens party anymore. It is looking at a lot more issues. It's not just environment. While environment remains a priority, it's starting to look at a lot more about inequality and looking at housing. I mean, they're positioning themselves as the party of renters. And federally, you can see that Adam Bandt is trying very hard to say we are willing to negotiate with Labor on these things to make them better, not necessarily be a bloc. And you can see that Labor has kind of worked out that the Greens are starting to position themselves as key challengers because they keep referring to them as the party of protest and as the major blockage to their legislation. And so you've got this big argument happening between Labor and the Greens within the parliament, but it's basically because both sides can see the opportunity in the electorate. So I don't think we're going to see a Greens majority government in any Australian jurisdiction anytime soon. But I don't think that people should rule out that the Greens could form majority parties in the future, particularly if they continue down this line of working out exactly what it is voters want from them on the progressive side of politics. The issue, of course, is that if you're going to do it, it's going to be in a place like the ACT or Tasmania because of their particular distributional way of counting votes. And also because you don't have to worry so much about regional seats, which is somewhere where the Greens are still having a lot of trouble making inroads in. And you cannot form majority government in this country unless you can also win over the regions and the rural parts of this country. I mean, it's why the Liberals are in coalition with the Nationals, because the Liberals can't do it by themselves either. And Labor is struggling, is more and more struggling to win the regions and the rural parts of Australia. So until we start to get a cut through in those very, very key areas, I think it's going to be a very big ask. So, yeah, I think keep an eye on what happens in the ACT and Tasmania, particularly when it comes to the Greens, but really also keep a very firm eye on the positioning of the federal party, because it is actually quite interesting in terms of how they negotiate. And they've also worked with the Liberals at times in the Senate to try and cause a little bit of trouble for the government. The enemy of my enemy is my friend kind of stuff. And it's been making for a really interesting parliament in terms of how legislation is getting through.
Okay, well, I have to put on my Greens fact-checking here thing. Technically, we have had a Greens majority government in this country in the Yarra City Council, which I know is not necessarily considered as counting, but it didn't happen.
I always forget local government, and I know that's terrible.
No, it's fine. I mean, it almost completely fell apart very quickly, but still some great people on that council. We were very happy with ourselves in Melbourne when we won that government, so that's important. I mean, it's like in the ACT. I mean, the ACT Greens Labor coalition is cited, particularly by the Greens, when people say, "Oh, the Greens never have to govern." You say, "Well, we have, because we've been in government in the ACT for more than a decade now." And after being in that coalition relationship for a while, of course, the next logical step for the ACT Greens is to say that, yes, we want to have a government in our own right. There's probably still a long way to go there, but at least you can appreciate that particular angle as to where they're going for. But yes, these independents are interesting. So the two seats that we lost went to these two independents. These are the first independents elected to the ACT Assembly in 25 years. Thomas Emerson, who is Craig Emerson's son, who ran for independents for Canberra. Is that David Pocock's deal? Was he sort of leading that? Does he endorse Emerson there? Is that a Pocock thing?
I don't know if that is a Pocock thing, because, I mean, Pocock actually does, he pretty much reigns supreme over all the independent movement in the ACT, but I'm not sure how much he was personally involved in that campaign, mostly because it was on a different side of Canberra to what I'm on. And, those delineations, those lines are strong in the territory. Don't cross the bridge.
Right, okay, different world, clearly. West side, east side, kind of Jets and Sharks vibe. And Fiona Carrick.
Exactly, we're the Sharks and the Jets.
Fiona Carrick won in Murrumbidgee, and she was running with the Fiona Carrick Independent Party. Again, I don't expect you to know the details there, but it does seem a bit odd that these independents have set up their own independent parties. But anyway, there you have it. I mean, were these independents running to the left, do you think, of ACT Labor Greens? Are they fighting for a more progressive agenda? And what are the ramifications for that, for those kind of, whether there's specifically Climate 200 Teals or not, but in that kind of general independent movement, what are the lessons that maybe the federal Liberals would be taking from these results and these two independents getting in?
Yeah, I'm not sure if they were running to the left of the Greens from the independent campaigns that I saw, and I saw a lot of Fiona's in terms of, what her volunteers were doing around the place. It was more, I suppose, of that centre-left, and it was more of a focus in terms of how we saw the Climate 200 Teals kind of emerge, a focus on integrity, a focus on environment, a focus on, fixing up what matters, which was a lot of the healthcare system system, for instance, that was a big thing. And having your government listen to you was another big thing. So I don't think it's necessarily going to be more progressive than what the Greens candidates were. I think it's more of what we did see in the federal election in terms of people voting for independents who sat somewhere in the middle of the major parties, but had environment and social justice and integrity as very big platforms. I think it just sort of speaks to this wider issue that we are seeing throughout Australian electorates. And I think it played out in the New South Wales Pittwater by-election as well, where people actually just want alternatives. And the issue for the Greens in the ACT is, as you say, they have been in government for so long, so they're seen as part of the apparatus of, you know, there are issues that are not necessarily being fixed by the people who are in government, which includes the Greens. They have a lot of power in the ACT. They're making a lot of decisions. And so they're painted with that same brush that we're not necessarily seeing in the rest of the country, except for the Yarra City Council. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Thank you very much.
And so, that is the flip side of what happens when you are a major player in government, not just in politics, is that people start to say, well, you are responsible for this. Like, no matter what you say, you actually have, you know, skin in the game in terms of being able to fix this. And so in the ACT election, with people frustrated with the ACT Labor Greens government, but not frustrated enough to kick them out, they went independents. And we are seeing that across the Australian electorate, where people are feeling frustrated by the people making their decisions. They're going independent. That happened in the most recent New South Wales by-election. And it also is what gives me pause when we look at things like Newspoll, for instance, and we see that Labor and Liberals are back, you know, in 50-50, Peter Dutton, preferred Prime Minister, all the rest of it. I think that is missing the fact that for the Liberals to win the Australian election, they have to win 18 seats. So if they're going to go into a coalition with some independents, they have to win, let's say, at least 15. Where are those seats? I can see the mood of the country. It's obviously, you know, not feeling great about the Albanese government, and for very, very valid reasons. But where are the 15 seats that change to becoming an LNP seat in Australia? And will the Teals all lose? Will the Liberals get back all of those seats? Are we going to see like a huge swing towards the Liberal Party? And I don't think that the mood is there for that. I think the mood is for people looking elsewhere, which is where you see the Greens, the Independents, and the minor parties start to really make some noise.
Wonderful analysis. Thank you, Amy. Good luck and commiserations, I suppose, to ACT Greens. Congratulations on those who won re-election, and commiserations to the ones that we lost along the way. Again, I have nothing but admiration for everybody who runs and tries to do some fucking democracy. So well done, team. Best of luck for the future.
Give us what you stole from us. Our bones, our skulls, our babies, our people. You destroyed our land. Give us the treaty. This is not your land. This is not your land. You are not my kids. You are not our kids.
All right, the main story, though, of course, that we want to talk about, we're royal watching. We love royal watching here at Serious Danger. We're always talking about Charles and Camilla and all those fucking lizards, and we're always fascinated about their activities and what they get up to, particularly when they visit our wonderful country of Australia. Again, Amy, you've been around Canberra. Charles and Camilla only went to Sydney and Canberra on this very short trip before they went off to Choggum in Samoa. Did you see the royals around town, and were you giddy with excitement?
I did not see the royals. I did see some crowds for the royals, but not particularly huge ones. There weren't exactly, you know, a huge amount of flags waving in the streets. In fact, I forgot that they were in town because I was like, why do I care? And so I went to lunch. I have a lovely lunch at this lovely little spot, and then saw somebody walk past with a little Australian flag. flag and was like, that's fucking weird. Why are you doing that? And then everyone around me was going, that's fucking weird. Why is somebody walking around with a flag? And then the wait staff were like, the king's in town. And we were like, oh, right, that guy. Forgot he was coming.
Yeah.
And the general vibe, at least, about half a kilometer away from where the king and queen were waving awkwardly at people was I think it was a bit more of a curiosity than anything this time round, because I just think in the midst of a cost of living crisis and a genocide, celebrating people who are basically famous for inheriting stolen wealth doesn't seem like such, a winning platform in terms of yay, Australia. That's just me.
It's a bit gauche, isn't it?
It is a bit.
gauche.
It's just like, oh, they're so humble. Well, are they? I mean, these people just rock up to one of their colonies when everyone's, struggling to put food on the table and just be all like, oh, yes, we understand your pain. We only had 8 courses instead of 9. It was terrible.
Wow, sounds like you hate this country and its traditions, Amy Remeikis. It's not acceptable.
Yes.
You're on the Sensible Centrist podcast.
Yes, it's a very I hold the very sensible position of thinking that the royals are stupid, and I wish them no ill will. I hope that Charles has a wonderful recovery and lives as long as his mother and grandmother. But if they could do it away from our country, that would be great.
All right, let's talk about the only thing worth talking about in regards to the royals' visit, and that was Lidia Thorpe sticking it to the man. On Monday, the Gunai Gunditjmara and Djab woman strode up the central aisle of the Great Hall of Parliament House after the King's address to tell him she did not accept his sovereignty before she was escorted out by security. I'm sure people have seen the footage and heard Lydia doing her thing, but for the record, she said, "You committed genocide against our people. Give us our land back. Give us back what you stole from us, our bones, our skulls, our babies, our people. You destroyed our land. Give us a treaty. We want a treaty in this country." It's important to note she didn't interrupt his address. Like, King Charles got to say everything he wanted to say, and then she chose her moment to get up there and let her know what she thought. We also later learned that she'd written multiple times requesting an audience with the king to discuss matters of treaty and sovereignty, and I'm not sure if those letters were ignored or they did not agree to meet with Lidia Thorpe to discuss such matters. In a statement after the protest, Senator Thorpe said she was attempting to hand the king a notice of complicity in Aboriginal genocide, according to the statute of the International Criminal Court of 1998. Of course, this protest sparked massive outrage, calls for her resignation. Everyone clutched their pearls. She also got international media coverage, and we had several days of discussion of Australian history, of colonisation, of the reality of genocide of First Peoples, of the frontier wars. A lot of discourse going on. What was your immediate thought when you saw Lidia Thorpe staging this protest this week, Amy?
First of all, I thought this guy has been in royal life his entire existence. I'm pretty sure he's been yelled at before. Pretty sure that has occurred. He didn't seem overly miffed by this. And secondly, I think, an Indigenous senator has just as much right as anyone else to tell the head of this state exactly what they feel about how this country has been colonized. I mean, Lidia Thorpe has been elected to represent a group of people, and she represents those people and their views, and very, very strongly. And I don't think that there is anything wrong with that, because if we're not speaking truth to power, what is the fucking point? I mean, Australians love to believe that we are these larrikins that don't respect authority, that, are very much comfortable with telling power exactly what we think about it. We celebrate people who yell at politicians in the lettuce aisle of Coles and Woolworths. We're very, very proud of the fact that we can walk up to anyone and just go, "Oh, mate, not happy with that." But the moment The moment that somebody actually does it in a way that counts, everyone just goes, oh my God, I'm so embarrassed. England, I'm so sorry about that. Honestly, we won't invite her again. Like, we're fine. You know, we're fine when everyone's being nice and comfortable and having all of these very quiet conversations in way we don't have to deal or reckon with them. But oh my God, to bring this into the international stage, people are going to think we're colonizers. People are going to think that, like, we don't actually respect our Indigenous our politicians or people and don't want them to actually have any treaty. And we can't have people thinking that, because we really love having the discussion and these safe little walls, but we don't want anyone to actually think that we're going to be serious about this. My God, it's humiliating. It's so ridiculous. I know that Lidia Thorpe was against The Voice because she wanted to have treaty first, but the rest of this country voted against The Voice quite conclusively. And that was meant to be the nice way to have these discussions. So if the country has voted against the nice way in order to have serious discussions about Indigenous sovereignty, treaty, and truth-telling, and letters and appeals to ask about these things with the head of state are ignored, the government is not moving forward with any of the other parts of the Uluru Statement of the Heart, which includes treaty and truth-telling. If everyone is just shelving these conversations because we're all uncomfortable about it, and there's a big chunk of the political apparatus who are trying to pretend that the Voice referendum was a referendum on anything to do with Indigenous rights, and, you know, we can now ignore welcomes to countries because Australia voted no in the Voice referendum. If all of that has gone on, then how the fuck are you supposed to actually raise these issues in Australia? That's what I think.
Yeah. Bloody oath. I think the protest was funny and cool and annoyed all the right people. It was good. And a few things I'd say. Important context that was removed from almost all the coverage I saw, which is these kind of protests are happening to every royal visit when they visit the colonies, right? It's just a feature now, particularly when they go to former colonies that have since, asserted their independence from the Commonwealth, or, other countries within the Commonwealth. When First Peoples have been fucked over by the legacy of colonization, these protests are happening all the time. We've seen William and Kate be, protested against as well. It's just a constant feature of any royal visit going anywhere. And that's a really good thing, because a royal visit carrying on without interruption, which is often what happens, security's in place and the public are often kept away from official engagements and everything's tightly media managed, allows them to perpetuate the idea that the royal family is a nice, friendly institution that's just about tradition and being nice and doing good charity works and stuff. And it allows them to escape the reality of their history. And I think what Lidia Thorpe's protest did is it pointed out like the actual reality of what it means to be part of the former British Empire, what the royal family actually represents. Okay, the nice charity things that they do, okay, sure. It also represents a legacy dripping in blood and dispossession. And she drew attention to that and pointed that out. And that makes people feel uncomfortable, of course, because everything's supposed to be nice and shiny and happy, and everyone's supposed to feel good at these official events. And Lidia Thorpe kind of interrupted that and arrived with a bit of fucking truth-telling, in my view.
Mm-hmm. And also, we pay for their visits. I mean,
right.
The Australian people pay to have these people come and visit us because they are our head of states. It's like having to pay your dad's fourth wife, your new stepmom, to come and visit you for your wedding or something like that. Like, it makes no sense. You should be able to speak your mind to power in any way that raises the issues that are important to you. And this country has a real big problem whenever it is an Indigenous person doing that, whenever it's somebody from a progressive side of politics that's doing that, and whenever it's somebody who just steps outside of the status quo. We can excuse all sorts of things when it comes to protests if we somehow agree with what they're protesting. But the moment that you disrupt traffic, embarrass somebody, make somebody feel uncomfortable, or, you know, just like take a little bit of attention to focus on a very, very important cause that we're all shifting to the side for something that makes you feel uncomfortable, well, that's when this country is up in arms. We all run around pretending that we're a nation of Ned Kelly when we're a nation of Ned Flanders. It's just horrendous, and we really do need to start reckoning with the fact that we are almost incapable of having uncomfortable conversations. And we're not going to grow up as a country until we start doing that.
Right. Just that deference to power. I mean, look, the thing that made this story different is that it was a protest from a senator, right? That was clearly the angle in international media. They were saying Australian senator, Australian politician heckles the king, as opposed to the normal story on these kind of visits, which is, you know, ordinary people, not to diminish their right to protest or the importance of their protest at all. But the thing that was different here is that you had a federal politician dressing in possum skins and calling out the king for his family's lineage and their responsibility for genocide and colonization and dispossession, right? That was the thing that's different. And we've talked a lot on this podcast about Lidia Thorpe. I have some criticisms of her approaches sometimes. I'm disappointed that she left the party. I think the way that the Voice debate was handled was, really regrettable for the Greens generally and for the broader First Nations justice movement. And I think she's said and done some stuff that's a bit stupid and distracting. That's my personal opinion. I'm not sure if Emerald would agree with me on all those fronts. But, I mean, you have to fucking hand it to her here.
Can you name a politician that hasn't done stuff like that?
Yeah, true. But this is a politician on my side. I don't mind when the dumb people do it. It's funny. And I can make fun of them. When she's broadly aligned with my politics, that's when it's a bit more of an issue. But I fully take your point. But yeah, you have to hand it to her in this particular instance to not be part of the political establishment, the political status quo, to be prepared to step out of that and do the rude, uncomfortable thing that no one else has the guts to fucking do, because that's what you believe in. You know, like, I think it's pretty staunch and fierce, to be honest.
Yeah, I think it is. And I think the fact that, you know, international media is talking about it, it really does shine a spotlight on some very big gaps in Australia's political discourse, because the Voice referendum was voted down a year ago, and we have not heard boo from the government in terms of how they plan to move forward. And that space has been filled by bad faith actors from the coalition in particular, who are now using that referendum to basically walk back any sort of Indigenous progress or any sort of conversation on this. And if you speak to any Indigenous leaders, people like anywhere, they all talk about the increase in racism that they're experiencing, how difficult it can be for them to get any sort of meeting or representation from their white leaders, because it's a really uncomfortable space now politically, and everyone's kind of like, oh, don't touch it. So Lidia Thorpe putting it on the world stage, putting those gaps on the world stage in the way that she did, and then fronting up to every single media interview and answering all of those questions, including the stupid ones, with what she was doing, why she was doing it, and having the receipts of, hey, I tried to meet with them these ways, you know, as you said, waiting for, a spot in terms of doing the address, making her point, and then, yes, she was taken out, but she was also, we've all seen Lidia Thorpe. When she doesn't want to go somewhere, it's going to take a lot to get her out of a room. We've all seen that happen in various protests. She allowed herself to be taken out of there, having made her point, and has continued making her point. And I think that it is a conversation that is well beyond time having in Australia, particularly in the political sphere.
Right. Let's take a look at some of the other reactions from folks. First of all, from other First Nations people, because it's in due fairness, it was not a universal acclaim or endorsement of Lydia's actions here. She had been protesting earlier in the day when the King was visiting the War Memorial. She was arrested at that protest was Cooma Elder Uncle Wayne Coco Wharton, who wanted to give the King this International Criminal Court notice for genocidal crimes. So presumably Lidia was trying to do the same thing that Uncle Wayne hadn't been able to do. We had Bundjalung woman, human rights lawyer, and ACT, Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander Children and Young People Commissioner, Nessa Turnbull-Roberts, pledging her support, pretty staunch support for Lidia and her actions there, praising her as someone who really fights for her people. Mununjali and South Sea Islander academic and professor of Indigenous Health Chelsea Wadago also praised the protest. Lidia gave a statement afterwards saying that in the morning before the protest, she met with and was supported by Ngambri Ngunnawal traditional custodians from the country, and she said she had the support from the Black Sovereignty Movement elders from around the whole country. I take the lead from the Black Sovereign Movement. That does not seem to be in line with the comments from Ngunnawal elder Auntie Violet Sheridan, who was there and welcomed King Charles and Camilla to her country. She said, Lidia Thorpe does not speak for me and my people. I'm sure she doesn't speak for a lot of First Nations people. It was disrespectful to come there and go on like that. There's a time and a place. We also had comments from Marsha Langton, who was very embarrassed. She offered an apology to King Charles on behalf of First Nations people in Australia, which some people might question whether she has the authority or the right to do that. I don't know. You got Senator Jacinta Namatjinpa-Price also condemning it, of course. Nova Paris, from the left the Australian Republican movement because of its position on the Israel-Palestine conflict, which was pretty bizarre. She said that Lidia should quit her position. Now, obviously, Amy, you and I are two whiteys here, but I'm just interested in what do you think when you see these kind of divisions within the Aboriginal political world play out? We saw it a lot during the Voice debate as well. We see it here now. What do you make of it all?
I think it is exactly the same as the divisions in, white communities, in suburbs, in, the Lithuanian community, like no one group of people is a monolith ever. And you cannot lump all people into the same ideas, political spectrum. You cannot say that every Indigenous person is going to think exactly the same way and have the same opinion, because that is absolutely insane. It's unhinged. It makes no sense. Of course, they share commonality in terms of the history of their culture and this country and colonization, but that doesn't mean that they think exactly the same way, because why would they? I mean, you and I don't think the same way. So this idea, this paternalistic idea that we have in much of white Australia, that all Indigenous people must be on the same page at all times, and the way that, of course, everyone is entitled to express their opinions, and of course in a flashpoint like this, you're going to have a lot of people from within community want to stand up and say, hey, this is what I think about it. But you also have a lot of times in media, which is run predominantly by white Australians, whenever an Indigenous person says something in terms of progressive politics or, with the Black Sovereignty movement, there is a habit of running out and gathering as many different Indigenous opinions who are against that as possible, and just saying, well, these people don't agree with that person, so that person must be wrong. It's not a right or wrong scenario. Nothing in politics can be like, when we're talking about these issues, is right or wrong. It is all informed by people's experiences, by people's own views on things, by how different people were raised, all of that sort of thing. So this idea that we need to have every Indigenous person stand behind Lidia Thorpe and say, yes, she was right and she speaks for me. Lidia Thorpe doesn't say that she speaks for every Indigenous person in Australia, just like I don't speak for every Australian Lithuanian person in Australia. In fact, I know I definitely don't, because my dad often tells me how full of shit I am and how I need to just stop going off the reservations. So, yeah, I just think we just need to stop trying to pretend that everybody has to agree with every single action. That's never going to happen in any sort of society. And we just need to listen to the different opinions and work out where we fall in terms of after what we've learned and after what we've listened to.
Well said. We had reactions from non-First Nations people as well, of course. The Greens were generally supportive of Lydia's actions. The Greens boycotted the royal reception because we don't believe in that shit, and we're Republicans. We think it's silly. I think Larissa Waters was on Q&A saying that, we think that obviously we believe in First Nations justice. We should be talking about these things, and that's why we didn't go to bow down to our colonial masters. I think broadly there's been a lot of leftist and sort of anti-colonial support for what Lidia did. Dick Smith said, I think that's the wonderful part of our democracy, that she's not going to be put in jail. That's nice, isn't it?
It is. Thanks, Dick.
I haven't heard from Dick Smith in ages. What the fuck's he up to? Wasn't he like hanging out with Pauline Hanson or something at some point? What's he doing?
Yeah, I think he appears on A Current Affair, like, every 3 months or so, and, talks about needing to start up a new political party. But I think, good on you, Dick.
Good on you, Dick. He was good on franking credits. I think Dick Smith he came out and said how stupid franking credits were. So he has my respect for that. But on some other issues, maybe not so much. There was also, of course, a lot of condemnation. On Q&A, Employment Minister Murray Watt said he didn't think Thorpe's demonstration worked to relay her message to those present. If the idea was to raise the issue with the people who were in the room, I think it failed miserably. And I saw a lot of this reporting across the board. People saying, ooh, Lydia's protest got a mixed reception in the room. It's like, guys, it wasn't for the people in the fucking room. It wasn't going to go well in the room. It was awkward and weird and like a big protest for the people who were in that room. Why do you think she was going to try and change their minds?
That's and didn't an audience member in that Q&A also just respond to Murray Watt there by just saying, you're talking about it, dickhead?
We're talking about it right now. So it's done exactly what it was supposed to do.
So yeah, it's actually, it's made its point. It's done exactly what it was intended to do.
I couldn't put it much better. I saw the tweet got a bit of heat this week from Hot Girl Hala. I think she tweets a lot about Palestine, but she posted, "This does not help your cause," and attributing that quote to a guy who hates you and your cause. Yeah. And I think that pretty much sums it up pretty well. Like, we're constantly seeing this discourse around any protest at all, right? These people who don't believe in anything that you stand for, lecturing you, letting you know all the discourses about the nature and the rudeness and the civility of the protest, as opposed to the actual, substance of what the protest is about.
Yeah.
And I think on those measures, if the protest was trying to raise the salience of these kind of issues of Australia's colonial history, the unfinished business, the dispossession, the genocide, the cultural genocide as well, I think Lydia's protest did extremely well, wouldn't you say?
Yeah, and as Mark Fennell, who did, post of Stuff the British Stole, said, the empire wasn't nice.
Mm.
Like, the empire, in the way that it carried out these genocides and the conquering of nations and, all of the theft and the death and the murder and the enslavement, it was not a nice empire. And so while now our view of the empire was, a lovely, sweet old woman in terms of the way that she presented, and then, her heirs and their heirs who pop out babies and make everyone feel good about themselves because aren't they lovely, nice people who do lovely, nice things, completely forgets the history of how they got there, what they're holding on to, and who pays for them. So, niceness has never changed anything. And I often find that it's when I'm not nice that I get more people to listen to what I'm saying. They may not agree with me. There may be questions about my tone, but they certainly are going to engage with what I'm saying. And really, that's all you can ask for in terms of having a debate, a political debate.
But it's just maddening. It's just history repeats itself so much. Protesters are never popular. Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. was not popular. The suffragettes were not popular. Of course, they were protesting because they were seeing something wrong with society. And the things they were criticizing in society were often maintained because they had the support of those in power. That's why those issues existed, and that's why the protests starts in the fucking first place.
Yeah, I always love when white liberals always quote, the letter from Birmingham jail from Martin Luther King as this way of just being all like, oh yes, we need to be civil in terms of politics and how we have these debates. Why was he in fucking jail? Why was he in jail? The letter is literally called Letter from Birmingham Jail. Why was he in there? Who put him in there? Oh my God, can you actually just think outside of this little binary box for 2 seconds?
Yeah. Details.
Yeah.
Some more unhinged responses, I think. There was a showbiz reporter, Peter Ford, who I love it when he wages into politics. Is incredible.
Are you blocked by Peter Ford? Are you among the blocked list?
I think I probably am, yes. Yeah. Almost certainly.
Yeah. Congratulations.
I believe he was against Egg Boy as well. He thought Egg Boy was sort of the slippery slope towards violent fascism. That's my major memory of Peter Ford's political contributions. But he decided to tweet that Lidia Thorpe is such a skank. And, of course, she's a skank because she's not polite enough. She didn't show enough civility to the royal family, so Peter Ford thinks it's acceptable to refer to her as a skank. It was pointed out that, isn't this ironic you're saying that when you're asking for a discussion of respect and politeness? And he replied, nice thought, but no, she's still a skank.
I'm sorry, is Peter Ford a Gold Coast teenager from the 1990s? Next time, his next tweet is just going to be Molly, 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 Mole.
I think the worst response I found came from Caroline De Rosso on Sky News. This is incredible. At a very basic human level, Lydia Thorpe's protest was a scene where a grown woman was hollering at a 75-year-old man with cancer, accusing him of being complicit in genocide. That's the nub of it. And she was really going on the angle that he's a cancer sufferer. This poor innocent 75-year-old man who just wandered into the Great Hall, didn't have anything to do with anything.
He just wanted some scones. He just found a nice seat.
And she was just yelling at him, a grown woman who doesn't have cancer.
He was tired. He just wanted to rest those weary legs. And then he was just yelled at. How horrendous. I love the implication that if you have cancer or have had cancer, you cannot actually commit any harm against anybody else because, oh my God, no, they had cancer.
Of course.
So no harm
he's
can be
still
delivered.
The fucking king, right? So he's still in this position of power and influence and being feted and welcomed by everybody. He's well enough to come to the fucking country. I'm pretty sure he can stand up to some criticism.
Yeah, I mean, like,
the fact
he's
that his
at
entire family's legacy and his position is predicated on blood and dispossession.
Literally at the Commonwealth Heads of Government meeting, CHOGM, where he's discussing things that heads of governments discuss while having cancer.
Yes.
So I think he's probably also going to hear some robust opinions from other Pacific leaders in those conversations. And I don't think anyone is going to be complaining that the king is not up to the job in that particular moment. But anyway, what would I know? I'm just sitting here on my couch, just wondering how we got to this position.
You're a skank. You don't know what's going on.
Also, Carolyn, the king's not going to love you back, babes. The king's not texting you back. So...
He's not reading Sky News. All right, final point here. I mean, we then everything devolved into a very silly debate, as it always does in Australian politics. I mean, Lydia Thorpe, the accusation, of course, is, hey, Lydia Thorpe, if you hate Australia so much, then you should quit your job as a senator, which is always great. You don't see it as legitimate, you should quit, which I love as an argument. It's like, hey, you think the First Nations people are screwed over by Australia? How about you have less power? Yeah? That makes all the sense in the world. Lydia responded by saying that she didn't actually swear allegiance to the crown during her swearing-in ceremony. She didn't swear allegiance to the heirs of the crown. She pledged allegiance to the heirs of the crown. There was some serious consideration that meant that she was in the Senate illegitimately and that she should be removed. Simon Birmingham was talking about, censoring her and then also actually seriously raising questions about her eligibility to be in the chamber at all. Lydia Thorpe then backtracked on Thursday, saying she accidentally misspoke during her swearing in. She said, "Forgive me, my English grammar isn't as good as others, and I spoke what I read, so I misspoke." Amy, I think this is so stupid.
Yeah.
And deeply, this is more embarrassing than anything Lydia Thorpe did in terms of a protest as a country. What did you make of all this eligibility nonsense?
We are not a serious country. And every single time I look into the Senate, I'm just like, how the fuck did 3/4 of you get in there? Honestly, I mean, the question that Simon Birmingham was asking is, is an Indigenous senator eligible to sit in the Senate? Is essentially what he was asking, which, I mean, the High Court has already ruled on whether the country can deport Indigenous people. And spoiler, no, they can't, because they're Indigenous, and so therefore have a, innate belonging to country in a way that white Australians do not have the same claim to. But this debate about eligibility is it is so ridiculously stupid, because Bob Katter, who has been in the parliament for 50 years, will tell anybody who asks that he does not swear allegiance to the crown. doesn't swear allegiance to the crown. And everyone just goes, oh, Bob, you hilarious larrikin, you. Nobody questions his eligibility because it makes no sense, because why would you? Because do you know what actually matters when you're in the Senate or in the House of Representatives is that you sign that little bit of paper that says, here is my oath, I'm signing it, I'm eligible to sit here, and everybody moves on. That's what actually makes you eligible to sit in the Senate. This idea that you're talking about, you're splitting hairs over heirs or hairs is just so stupid, so Australian Senate, and it is why nobody actually takes that chamber seriously.
Yeah. Jesus. It's really sick. Like, people like, you need to swear allegiance and you need to really mean it, and we can actually sense what's in your soul, and you need to give up on all your principles. And even if you believe in democracy, you believe in a republic, you need to forego all that if you want to take up your seat in the federal parliament.
We're literally about, like, one turn of this debate away from people saying you should be connected to a lie detector to see whether you actually do mean that you swear allegiance to the crown or not. Someone will probably suggest that we have a sorting hat that works out exactly where you should sit in the Senate or not. It's just so stupid. And it's also, at the heart of this wider debate, right, about the monarchy, should Australian politicians representing Australian people be swearing allegiance to a foreign power? Because that's what they're arguing about. Oh, you're not swearing allegiance. You don't believe that you should really be swearing allegiance to a foreign power. So therefore, how dare you sit in the Australian Senate and represent the Australian people? Make it make sense. It doesn't actually make sense to me at all. Yes, I'm a Republican.
Not just a foreign power, but a person and their heirs, so just their children. By the sake of him being born into a certain family, then all our elected representatives should swear allegiance to them? That's fucking bonkers.
And anyone who knows their history of the dismissal knows that, Charles, as an heir of the Queen at that time, did know about the plan to ditch our Prime Minister before we knew about it, that he was about to be dismissed. Like, he has been a major player in Australian politics and probably changed the direction of modern Australian politics, certainly. So it's not as if he's this passive person who's just kind of like, oh, Australia, and comes and pats us on the head every 12 years or so. Just, it's so ridiculous. It's just, do you represent the Australian people or do you not? Do you want to actually have debates that actually impact the Australian people or do you not? Because there's a fuck ton of shit going on in Australia right now impacting the Australian people. And I can tell you what, whether or not Lidia Thorpe meant it when she swore allegiance to the crown and its heirs or its hairs or whatever, is not one of them.
Good stuff. Normal country.
Normal, very, very, very healthy country.
By the way, I'm not a Trump supporter in any way, shape, or form. I've had the opportunity to have him on my show more than once. I've said no every time. I don't want to help him. I'm not interested in helping him.
The night is still young. We'll see.
If I have him on, the night is still young?
Yeah.
You think I'll have him on?
I think you'll have him on.
There you go. I think that'll do us for a show. Thank you so much for being my special guest co-host, Amy Remeikis. It's been a pleasure having you on the show. It really means the world. Thank you for taking time out of your busy schedule. We look forward to reading your fact checks and your brave truth-telling via the Australia Institute and other outlets. We have a call to action. I know you are, very admirably vocal about the plight of Palestinian people and what is happening in Gaza at the moment. Where are you directing your attentions and resources? Where do you tell people to go if they want to do something for the people of Palestine?
I have been concentrating my resources on Palestinian-led causes on the ground who are basically taking all donations and using it to buy from the markets and from existing food, medical resources, infant formula, all of the rest of it in order to get it to people as quickly as possible. So the Samir Project is one group that I've been supporting, but there are several others, Ibrahim for Gaza, Translating Palestine. If you're not comfortable, giving direct money, I just urge you to just have a look at what they're doing. Everyone is showing what they're doing exactly on their pages. And really, it truly doesn't matter or not how you think they're spending the money, because I don't think any of us can understand what it is like to be in Gaza, or particularly northern Gaza at the moment, where no food, aid, medical resources, help has gotten through for more than 2 weeks, and we are seeing a genocide within a genocide. So whatever you can do to try and alleviate some of the minute by minute suffering that people are going through, I think is worth the risk of whether or not you know how they're spending your money.
All right, we'll put those links in the show notes if people want to chip in and support those causes. You can also rate and review this show. If you listen to us on Apple Podcasts, whatever, give us a 5-star review. That helps spread the word. Share it around. Take your favorite episode. If you like this episode, share it with someone that you know who doesn't listen to the show. That would mean the world. And we're on the socials at Serious Danger AU, or you can go to seriousdangerpod.com for all the links and stuff. Thank you, Amy. Much obliged.
Thank you.
Serious Danger Australia.